Not all the kings after King David were men after God's heart like David was. Instead of trusting in the power of God, King Ahaz trusted in the power of the king of Assyria. And by trusting the powers of this world instead of trusting the power of God, King Ahaz made a decision that led to his destruction and the destruction of all of God's people. And the Bible scholar J. Alec Motyer, he explains that Ahaz's decision led to a process where the Assyrian Empire, then later the Babylonian Empire, would overpower and overcome God's kingdom, the throne of David. So by the year 568 BC, the throne of David disappeared. Descendants of King David were no longer kings, so God's people were no longer kings. They were living in a world ruled by Rome, and they were living in a world ruled by Rome because descendants of King David were no longer kings. Too many kings after King David turned away from God and were overpowered by the powers of this world. So God's people were no longer kings, God's people were no longer in positions of leadership, and this led to a world where God's people were ruled by the powers of Rome. And the powers of Rome chose a very ungodly man to be king. King Herod was chosen by Octavian and Mark Antony to be king of Judea. Octavian later became Caesar Augustus. So we're going through a story that's traditionally part of the Christmas story, but I think there is some value in looking at this story outside of Christmas. So there were a group of magi, a group of ancient astronomers. Notice how I didn't call them wise men as a lot of people would call them. They were ancient astronomers. We're not going to call them wise men, we're going to call them ancient astronomers. Now the Bible scholar N.T. Wright, he explains that these men, they spent their lives studying the stars. And they believed if something incredible was happening in the sky, that pointed to something incredible happening on earth. So one day these men, they see a star in the sky, and based on their studies, they believe that this star was pointing to the Messiah. Now this star leads them to Jerusalem. Now you and I know this star as the Star of Bethlehem, but the star didn't lead these magi to Bethlehem. These magi didn't follow the star to Bethlehem. They followed the star to Jerusalem. It makes you wonder, why didn't they follow this star all the way to Bethlehem? Why didn't the star guide them all the way to Bethlehem? Reading the Bible, it seems that the star led them to Jerusalem, and instead of following the star to Bethlehem, they arrive in Jerusalem and they go to King Herod. They obviously thought that King Herod would want to help them find the Messiah, the newborn king. We're going to find out that the people of Jerusalem would never have called the Magi wise men. The people of Jerusalem would not be happy with us calling the Magi wise men, because in their eyes the Magi did something very unwise. A Bible scholar named Charles Price, he essentially says the Magi did something very unwise by going to King Herod for help. Why did the Magi go to King Herod for help? They clearly did not know King Herod the way the people of Jerusalem knew King Herod. They may have known nothing about King Herod. They were following the star, and they arrive in Jerusalem. And it wasn't the star that led the Magi to Bethlehem. It was King Herod. Important to recognize that. So was it a case that the Magi were in a position where they had to wait, and they were in a position where they had to wait for God to test their decision making so that they choose to follow God instead of following anything else? I'm not sure. We don't know. But they went to King Herod for help. They were following the star. They arrive in Jerusalem. From this we can deduce that the star led them to Jerusalem. And they must have thought Jerusalem is the holy city of the Jews, the ultimate place of worship. It's where people worship the God of the Jews. And King Herod, residing in Jerusalem, if he's the king of this Jewish region, obviously he believes in the God of the Jews. Clearly he's the best person to go to for help. So the more you think about it, you can't blame the Magi for thinking that King Herod was the best person to go to for help. He's the king of a Jewish region, so obviously he worships the God of the Jews. And this highlights the tragic state of affairs that the holy city and the whole Jewish region of Judea was ruled by a man who was not a man after God's heart. This man was as far from King David. This man was far from the man King David was. There was a night and day difference between King Herod and King David. King Herod was as far as it gets for a man after God's heart. King Herod could not have been further away from a man who desires God's heart. And the fact that King Herod was king of a Jewish region, a region of people who worship the God of the Jews, the fact that this man was king, just shows you the tragic state of the affairs of God's people were in. So the Magi knew nothing about King Herod. If they knew anything about King Herod, they probably knew of him for his building projects. King Herod was an incredible builder. Before he became king of Judea, he had an incredible military experience. He built the fortress in Masada, which was an example of his expertise in military strategy. And his crowning achievement would have been the port of Caesarea, which became a center of trade and commerce. King Herod built things that really boosted the trading economy of his region. King Herod really built the prosperity of his region. He was known for his building projects. So the Magi, they may have known King Herod for his building projects and how he made his region a more prosperous region. They may have known that he really boosted the economy of his region. King Herod was known for his building projects, and the most beautiful thing he built was the Temple of Jerusalem, the ultimate place of worship for the God of the Jews. So if the Magi knew about this, if they knew that Herod built incredible things and the most beautiful and incredible thing he built was the Temple of Jerusalem, the ultimate place of worship for the God of the Jews, then how could there be any doubt in their minds that Herod worshipped the God of the Jews? How could they doubt that the king of a Jewish region, who built the ultimate place of worship for the God of the Jews, how could the Magi doubt that he would be interested, if not passionate, about helping them find the one the Jews were waiting for, the newborn king the Jews were waiting for? The thing is, even if the Magi knew about Herod's reputation for building incredible things, and the most incredible and beautiful thing he built was the Temple of Jerusalem, the ultimate place of worship for the God of the Jews, I doubt the Magi knew that outside the Temple of Jerusalem, Herod built the fortress of Antonia, named after Mark Antony, one of the most prominent Roman figures, a man who represented the power of Rome. So outside their place of worship, the Jews would see the fortress of Antonia, named after Mark Antony, one of the most prominent figures of Rome. So the presence of Rome is strongly influencing this Jewish region. And again, Herod built the port of Caesarea. He built the city of Caesarea, named after Caesar. And in the city of Caesarea, there was a temple where you could worship Caesar as a god. In a place full of people that worshiped the God of the Jews, there was a temple where you could worship Caesar Augustus as a god. So again, in a Jewish region where people worship the God of the Jews, Herod is building things that are communicating the power of Rome. In a Jewish region where people worship the God of the Jews, Herod is building things that communicate the power of Rome. King Herod could not be further from a man after God's heart.